There's a case to be made that many people who are morally okay with theft or scamming others tend to have antisocial personality disorders that make them okay with increasing acts of depravity or violence. In many cases, they actually enjoy it. It's why you see so many people who are robbers or scam artists end up facing domestic abuse cases, rape charges, or murder sentences. Nothing they did prior to their more severe crimes actually indicated that they were willing to do something so depraved or violent, but at the end of the day, morally, they were okay with it. People tend to say that the criminal lifestyle attracts psychopaths or sociopaths, but you could argue that it's the other way around. And as a result, oftentimes criminals don't think about the long-term consequences of their actions. They need things happening constantly, constant stimulation, and need constant violence that almost makes it seem like they think they're living in a movie. Except they're not. They're living in real life. And in the summer of 2016, a drug runner from Maryland learned that harsh truth when he planned a vicious, mafia-style barnyard execution of a snitch. Kevin Coles was a 36-year-old drug trafficker who split his time between New York City and Hagerstown, Maryland. Hagerstown sits in western Maryland, about a 20-minute drive from the Pennsylvania border, and in the late 2010s, it had a serious heroin and crack cocaine problem that Coles was a significant part of. Coles was moving substantial amounts of heroin and crack cocaine through Hagerstown and into Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, across the state line. He wasn't working alone. His operation involved a network of associates, including 30-year-old Tory White of Waynesboro, Pennsylvania, and 31-year-old Devin Dickerson of Hagerstown, who was helping run the drug distribution side. Also connected to the network was Kenyatta Corbett, a heroin trafficker from Hagerstown in his own right, who moved product through Hagerstown, Chambersburg, and into West Virginia. These men were running a regional drug operation that was generating serious money and serious federal attention. Wendy Ann Chaney was 39 years old and lived in Hagerstown. She had been in a romantic relationship with both Kevin Coles and Tory White, which was a complicated situation and one that had put her directly inside their drug operation. She had been helping both of them with their distribution activities. At some point, she came to the attention of the DEA. Whether she reached out herself or was approached first isn't entirely clear, but she began cooperating with federal drug investigators. She was giving the DEA information about the operation, including the drug trafficking, the people involved, and the money, and she was preparing to testify. Coles found out, so did White, Dickerson, and Corbett, and once the four of them knew that Wendy Chaney was cooperating with the DEA, the decision that was made was not to run, or to lawyer up, or to get their product off the streets. The decision was to kill her. Coles and his associates didn't plan to do it themselves, they contracted it out. Corbett went with Jarrell Ajibesan, a Baltimore member of the Black Gorilla family, a gang we've talked about before on this channel and our other channel, TCOS, to begin recruiting people to travel to Pennsylvania and carry out the murder. Ajibesan knew people in Baltimore who would do it. The payment arrangement was specific. The killers would be given 20 bands in cash that was supposedly sitting in a safe in a barn on a property in Mercersburg, Pennsylvania, owned by a man named Philip Matthew Jackson. Philip Jackson bought and sold cocaine, crack cocaine, and heroin from the Black Gorilla family in the area. His farm was essentially a drug transaction location connected to the BGF supply chain, and that's why Coles chose it as the execution zone and why he claimed there was 20K there. However, Jackson himself wasn't involved in the planning of the murder. In that regard, he was completely innocent. In addition to the 20 bands, the killers were told they could keep any drugs and firearms they found on the Jackson property. That was the deal. Come to Mercersburg, kill Wendy Chaney, take the money and the drugs. It's not much, but it's definitely a step up from the story we talked about the other week, where the gunman only got $250 for clipping a snitch. On June 25th, 2016, the killers traveled from Baltimore to Mercersburg and arrived at Philip Jackson's property on Welsh Run Road in Franklin County. It was a rural property with a barn. Wendy Chaney was there, along with her friend Brandon Cole. When the killers arrived, they encountered not just Wendy Chaney, who was there, the target, but Cole and Jackson as well. They were two people simply present at the wrong place at the wrong time, although one could argue Jackson wasn't, since it was literally his farm. The killers, including Johnny Jenkins Armstrong, made a decision. If Chaney got clipped, that would make the other two witnesses. All three of them were going to die. They zip-tied all three victims' hands behind their backs, walked them into the barn, and executed them. Jackson and Cole were each shot once in the head. Chaney was shot twice, once in the back and once in the back of the neck. Then they set the bodies on fire. When Pennsylvania State Police arrived at the scene, Wendy Chaney and Brandon Cole were already dead. Philip Jackson was alive. He was transported to York Hospital, where he died shortly after arrival. There was one more detail that wasn't yet known, but it was the stupidest part of the story. After killing 3 people and burning the barn, the killers searched the property for the $20K in the safe. They never found it. The money wasn't even there. The whole payment, the thing they'd been promised for crossing state lines and executing someone, didn't even exist. They left with some drugs and firearms from the property and nothing else. Not only was $20,000 already a light enough payment for a job so risky, but they didn't even get it. Pennsylvania State Police and the DEA began investigating immediately. They knew Wendy Chaney had been cooperating with federal drug investigators. They knew she'd been inside the Coles and White drug operation. So when she turned up dead along with 2 other people in a barn in Franklin County, investigators had a clear direction to look. The DEA's Philadelphia Field Division and the Harrisburg Resident Office drove the investigation, coordinating with Pennsylvania State Police, the Maryland State Police, and the FBI. It was a whole 7-year investigation that pulled in agencies from 2 states and produced a case that touched everyone from the man who contracted the murder to the people who helped plan it to the ones who pulled the triggers. Over the course of the investigation, the network unraveled piece by piece. Prosecutors built out the full picture: the drug operation, the decision to have Chaney killed, the chain of contacts from Coles to Corbett to Adjabison to the Baltimore crew, the travel to Mercersburg, and the murders. They documented everything: the phone records, the financial connections, the testimony of cooperating witnesses. One by one, members of the crew began appearing in court. Devin Dickerson, just 31, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to distribute heroin and crack cocaine and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Kenyatta Corbett pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison with a consecutive 20-year term. Jarrell Adjabison pleaded guilty in June of 2022 to Hobbs Act robbery and being an accomplice to the use of a firearm during it. He will never get out of prison. Nicholas Preddy, one of the shooters that night, pleaded guilty to attempting to kill a witness and was sentenced to 30 years. Johnny Jenkins Armstrong pleaded guilty and in December of 2023 was sentenced to life in prison with an additional consecutive 20-year term on a companion robbery charge. Jenkins Armstrong will die in prison, and the worst part for him was that he was lied to and left that barn without a penny in his pocket. Now it was Kevin Coles' turn. Over 3 weeks in Harrisburg before Judge Connor in April of 2022, prosecutors laid out the drug operation, the decision to contract the murders, and the chain of events that put a hit squad on a rural Pennsylvania road on June 25, 2016. He had killed a witness to steer clear of a drug charge, only to instead have 3 people executed, still get trialed for his drug operation, and actually expose a lot more than he had originally planned. The jury deliberated for approximately 3 hours. They convicted Coles on all 16 counts: murder for hire, robbery, drug trafficking, and firearm charges. In March of 2023, Judge Connor sentenced Kevin Coles to 3 consecutive life sentences, plus an additional 35 years on top of that. He could get brought back to life like a zombie 3 times, and he still wouldn't have served his sentence. Tory White went to trial separately in May of 2023. He was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder, and faces a mandatory life sentence for each victim. Wendy Chaney was 39 years old and was cooperating with the DEA because she was inside a drug operation and was trying to get out. Her gang, led by her boyfriend, responded by hiring inner-city killers to clip her, a plot that had been openly talked about within prison walls and had over 10 people involved in its planning and execution. The gangsters that killed them did it in an attempt to avoid a drug case, but not only got charged in the drug case regardless, but got life sentences as well. Cole could have made parole on the drug charges, like 20 years in with good behavior, but now he will die in prison. And the guys who shot for him didn't even get the money he promised them. How's that for a complete shit show?